It's gonna take a second to load, but it's on its way to going live.
Awesome.
So Zoom does allow us to do this. It's really nice.
That is so cool. I didn't know this, so I'm learning.
Okay. All right. So there is a little bit of a delay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, and I think, okay, it's live. Okay. So, hi everyone who is going to be joining us. I don't think there's anybody on right now. But we want to welcome you to Beekeeping with Amy Owen, part 1 of a now 2-part series. We had some high winds, which makes it unable to go and do the hive inspection today, but she's still going to talk with us about beekeeping, her bees, what she does, some of the tools, and a special treat at the end. And then at the very, very end, if there's anybody who's on who has a question, type it into the chat box and we will get it answered. All right, so awesome. It's all you, Amy. Oh, okay. I forgot about myself. I'm so sorry. I do it every single time. My name is Charlie, and I work for the Girl Scouts of New Mexico Trails. I am the camp director and the program manager for the Outdoors Pillar. Now it's all you, Amy.
Okay, so I am Amy Owen, and I am the, I guess, owner now of the business Desert Hives. So I do that, and then I also manage the hives at the Open Space Visitor Center in Albuquerque off of Coors for the state beekeeping certification program. Sorry, my computer is like shaking because my cat got on the table. So that's a little bit about me. I've been beekeeping for about 5 years, and I feel like I still, there's my cat. I still have so much to learn. But yeah, I just love it so much. I've served on the state board for the New Mexico Beekeepers Association, and I've also helped run our city group called ABQ Beaks. So that's a good resource if you guys want to check that out at abqbeaks.org if you want to get into beekeeping. And then my website is deserthives.com. And you can read a little bit more about what I do and about myself. I mostly manage hives for other people. I do like hive sitting when other beekeepers are gone. I do mentorship and kind of like consulting for other beekeepers. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. And then, so what is beekeeping? Do you want me to go ahead and get into that? So beekeeping is keeping bees, literally. So if you think about it, you're keeping bees in a hive as opposed to what bees would be doing in the wild, which is finding places like a tree with a, you know, a hole in it. They'll go into that tree and start building comb and making a hive in a tree. Or unfortunately, sometimes people's houses, if you have like a little hole in a wall, they'll go in between the outside wall and your inside wall and make hives. But beekeeping is literally keeping bees. Let me show you. Keeping bees in a hive box. So I brought, here we go. I brought, this is what's called a medium-sized hive box for a Langstroth hive. And I laugh because beekeeping is like, it's such a good name for it because you want to keep your bees in the hive. You don't want them to leave the hive. So part of like proper beekeeping and hive management is keeping your bees in your hive and not having them leave and swarm out of the box. So let me stand up. I'm trying to get a frame out for my lap and it's not working. So I wanted to show you guys. So in a box, on a Langstroth hive, you have what are called frames. So this is one frame, and you have different kinds of frames. And guess what kind of hive frame this is?
Honeycomb.
What's in there? Huh?
Honeycomb.
Yeah. There's my other cat. Oh my gosh. This is really.
Oh, hold on a second. I think the cat muted you. There we go.
Okay. I was saying this is so unprofessional, but might be a little funner. Anyways, So yeah, this is honeycomb, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little bit of pollen in some of those cells. And on this side, you can see that some of it is capped and some of it isn't capped. And that's because when the bees are collecting nectar from a flower, they suck up the nectar in their proboscis. Kind of looks like a straw coming out of their mouth. And then they fly back to the hive and they give that nectar to another bee through a process called trophallaxis. So they don't actually, the bee that got the nectar from the flower doesn't even put it in one of these cells. They give it to another bee first, and it mixes with all these different like microorganisms and bacteria. It's really interesting. And then that second bee is the bee that puts it into the cell. And then they flap their wings to reduce the moisture content in the nectar till it's about 16% water. And then once that's complete, they'll cover it with wax. So that's why you see some of it's covered with wax, some of it's not. None of this is.
Right. Do they make the wax themselves? I don't know. Maybe I.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. And I actually have a picture for you guys. Do you see the wax coming out of the bee's abdomen?
Yeah. Looks like two little yellow spots.
Yeah, so it's secreted from their abdomen. And then they use their legs and mouth parts to kind of chew it and manipulate it and make all this comb and cover the honey. Or they'll also use wax to cover the brood, which is the baby bees.
Oh, cool.
So they go from egg to a larva, and then they're covered and they pupate, kind of like a cocoon, like with caterpillars and butterflies. So yeah, beekeeping is really like managing the different parts of the hive, which is like where the honey is, making sure it's in a good spot, and managing the brood, making sure it's where it needs to be, and checking for like diseases and pests in your hive, making sure they're healthy, making sure they're bringing in nectar. And most importantly, you're making sure your hive is queen right.
Okay.
Did you notice a bee that looks different than the others?
Yeah, she's got a longer abdomen.
Right, yeah. So she has a much longer abdomen. She's usually not as stripy. There's some stripy queens, but you're making sure your queen's in there and laying because that's what keeps the hive going. So that's kind of what beekeeping is in a nutshell. And I have some other things to show you guys. I wish I could have gotten in the hives today, but that's what we're gonna do next since it's so windy.
Yeah. And then if I was just gonna say for the people who are watching, because we do have some watchers. So if you guys can, if you're a Girl Scout, if you can comment your name and tell us where you're watching from. And then just a reminder that if you have any questions, we'll have time for questions at the end, but type them into the chat now so that we can be prepared to answer them. All right.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Because there's things I don't think about when I'm talking. Because I'll assume people know, or I get excited.
We've got some people that I know from our council on radio, but we also have somebody from the greater New York area who is a brownie with us right now.
That's so awesome. I love that about this time. We're meeting people like all over. So when I'm beekeeping, guys, I usually just wear this and like a long sleeve shirt. And this protects you from the bees so they don't sting you. Usually bees are really calm, but when you get into their home and you're like taking it apart and manipulating it, you have to expect that they're going to be a little defensive. So beekeepers should wear protection. They don't always. And sometimes there are really gentle hives. Hives are all different in the way, just their demeanor. So, and then this is a smoker. So you put fuel in here. A lot of beekeepers like to use manure because it burns really cool. And so the smoke that comes out isn't hot, because you don't want hot smoke on the bees. You wouldn't want to get a puff of hot smoke on you either. So, and what the smoke does is, so in nature, like if the bees smell smoke, they're going to think, oh my gosh, there's a fire nearby. Let's go gorge on honey and fill up with all the honey we can and leave our hive if we have to, if there's a fire. So that's one theory of why smoke works so well. But another reason, it's kind of twofold. Beekeepers use smoke on the bees because it also blocks a pheromone they send out. So bees communicate a lot through smell. Their smell is like, I should know this. I want to say it's thousands of times better than ours, but a lot of their communication is done through smell. And whenever they feel disturbed or like there's a threat, they release a pheromone that smells a lot like bananas. And that's kind of like, there's a predator nearby, we need to be defensive and deal with it. And so the smoke, it blocks that pheromone from like being spread throughout the hive. So anytime I smell like banana or like they're making pina coladas, it smells like tropical, I'll use a little more smoke. And then I brought my hive tool. So this, you can see all this gunk on it because I'm not the cleanest person, but also because this is propolis, and it's like a resin that bees get from trees and other plants to seal up their hive. And it also has antimicrobial properties, so it keeps them healthy from disease and whatnot. It's a really amazing thing. So, but anyways, you use this tool to like pry apart frames and lift frames out of boxes, kind of like a lever. And I brought a bee brush. So if you ever need to brush off a frame to see it better because it's covered in bees, or you're moving a frame from one hive to the other, and you want to leave the bees behind, brush them off with this. But yeah, that's kind of what I brought today, just to show you like some of the tools we use, what beekeeping is, some bee basics. Yeah. Do we have any questions? Uh-oh.
No questions from the girls yet. We do have another girl from two more girls who chimed in with, they're from here from New Mexico.
Cool.
And then so I guess we lost some people and we got some people back. You guys actually lost me for a minute. So if I was just frozen on your screen for a little while, my Zoom shut down, it came back up, but we're still good. So if you guys are just joining us, we're with Amy Owen. We're not going to be doing the hive inspection today because of the wind, but she's going over what it means to be a beekeeper, like what a beekeeper is, and the tools that they use. And then go ahead and put, if you're a Girl Scout, put your name and where you're from in the chat. And if you have any questions, you can write your questions in the chat and we'll have time to answer them at the end. I do have a question though, if I can ask it.
Yeah, love questions.
So I wanted to know what is different about your job in the different seasons that we have? So like specifically summer versus winter.
Oh my gosh, so much different. So I've been laughing about that recently because in the spring, so we really do have all 4 seasons here. And in the spring is the busiest time for beekeepers because the bees are coming out of winter and they are, they're starting to build up. So the size of the colony inside of hives is just increasing exponentially. And so it's just a super busy time of year because if they get too crowded, your bees are going to swarm and they'll leave. And so that's part of like keeping your bees, right? So you're doing a lot of hive management in the spring to make sure you split your hives and the bees don't split themselves and go. So spring's super busy, and you also have a lot of, well, you hopefully have a lot of nectar coming in so that you have a lot of honey. And then in the summer, it starts to slow down a little bit. Sometimes you have more nectar flow in the summer, but you're not quite as busy managing the growth of your hive, like the growth of the colony itself. So it slows down a little bit in the summer. And then in the fall and late summer, they're really getting ready for winter. So it's a slow time, and you're just kind of making sure they have enough resources going in. So you're making sure they have enough honey to survive the winter. That's why they store honey. You're making sure there's a good enough size colony to go into winter. And so you're kind of slowing down, you're making sure they're set, and then in the winter, it's really nice because beekeepers get a complete break from beekeeping. You really shouldn't open your hive in the winter. And so you can make sure there's extra resources for them, like in case they do run out of honey. There's ways of doing that without opening the hive. But for the most part, in the winter, beekeepers really get to relax and not work so much. And then spring comes and it's like you hit the ground running, and then it just kind of trickles down and slows down till winter. So
kind of sounds like summer camp, getting all the lead up to summer camp.
Yeah.
So we have a question. It's from Mesa, and she says, how much honey do you get?
Very good question. So sometimes, especially we're in the desert, and so our nectar flows aren't very reliable. They can be kind of patchy and different every year. And so some years, even having quite a few hives, you just won't get any honey. And it's really hard. Like, you have to make sure you don't pull too much honey, because then your bees are going to die over the winter because they are lacking in food. So, but some years in like a really healthy hive with a good nectar flow, in a good area, where your bees are placed is a big deal. You want to make sure there's enough forage nearby. So bees that are healthy and have available resources, so that kind of hive, I'm trying to think of an example of like average, but I just pulled about 40 pounds of honey from one hive. Yeah. And so that was awesome. That was in Northwest Albuquerque, kind of near the Open Space Visitor Center, near St. Pius High School. So that kind of gives you an idea. Like, I just pulled 35 pounds from that hive. They have so much more honey still in there. So that's why I was able to do that. And I might be able to get more throughout the season. We'll see. But that's not unusual if they're in a good spot. But like here in the East Mountains where I am, like some of my hives, I've never pulled honey from them just because they need what they get and they don't have great forage in this spot. So it kind of stinks. My house is just like I'm going to keep bees here that need to go elsewhere at some point. It's just like a hangout spot. But yeah, so it really depends on what's around your bees and how much honey you get. So.
So it kind of leads up to another question that I had, was how much honey do you need to leave for the bees? Because bees eat the honey, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
That's such a good question. And honestly, I think there's even some beekeepers that like don't really research that.
Oh no.
And they just pull the honey and then they go into winter and they're like, why did I lose my bees? And what's funny is that also depends on where you're at. So if you're in an area with a really hard winter, like East Mountains, not that we have really hard winters, but East Mountains versus town, like you're gonna need to keep more honey. And so our rule of thumb out here is here, this will help. So if you have a brood box beneath this, about this size, or two, there's what's called a deep, which is about like 2 medium boxes. You need to leave about this much honey, a full medium on top, which is like, I think 45 pounds of honey. So it's quite a bit. And then I know like in Minnesota, they're like, you need to leave 70 pounds of honey. I know. So it's a lot. But there are some areas where you don't need as much. Like you can get by with 35, whatever. And it also depends on your bees. Some bees are more
makes sense for Minnesota because they have a longer, harder winter.
Right. Yeah. Longer, harder, colder winter.
Yeah.
Us, not so much. So the bees are going to need more honey to stay warm because they're using more energy to create warmth in their colony by vibrating their wings or flight muscles. So
And we do have another question, either from Nicole or from Nicole's daughter, and she says, "How long do the bees survive? So how long? What's their lifespan?"
So a worker bee lives about 5 to 6 weeks. I think this picture goes this way. So these girls live about 5 to 6 weeks, and the queen can live anywhere from 2 to 6 years depending on her environment. Usually it's more like 2 to 3 years for a queen, but the worker bees have a pretty short lifespan. And when you see bees out foraging, they're the older bees because it's their job. That's kind of like the end of their life. That's their last job, is to go out and forage. And so they're the older, like 5, 6 week bees. But what's interesting is winter is longer than 5 to 6 weeks, right? And this whole colony has to survive through winter. So you do have what are called winter bees, and they have bigger fat bodies. So they have fat stores to help get them through winter. And they can live obviously like 5 months or so, 5 to 6 months, because they, they're just different. So
Really cool.
yeah, it's
very like other animals will hibernate in the winter, and to do that, they also keep their fat stores because that way they can survive longer with less food.
Exactly. Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, similarity between insects and mammals.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
So we don't have any other questions so far in the chat. Do you want to go ahead and show us the honeycomb?
Yeah.
Because I know that, so I have not had a chance to, but I know that some people just straight up eat honeycomb.
I'm like bending down. It's so yummy. So the only honeycomb I have with me, the other is in my freezer, is what I showed you.
Nice.
But that's the honeycomb I showed earlier. What was I going to tell you? But yeah, so this is from the Langstroth hive, right? That box I had. Mm-hmm. But I do have like loose honeycomb that doesn't have, there's plastic foundation in the middle of this. So you can't just like cut it. It's on top of plastic on both sides, and there's like a plastic strip in the center of this. But in top bar hives, the honeycomb hangs from a top bar, like literally. So say this was the top bar, it would just hang, and the bees can create honeycomb that just hangs from that scaffolding. And my kids, like one morning I woke up
oh no,
and I came downstairs, and I think he was 3 at the time, he was chewing on like the top bar of my top bar hive where there was like some honeycomb left. So my kids love to eat like the honey in the comb, and you can swallow it. I don't know if it's a texture thing, but I just chew the honey out and then I spit the wax. I think some beekeepers would be like, oh my gosh, you wasted it. But I don't know. I'm not one to swallow all that wax like my kids. They don't care. But it's really good. It's really yummy.
What are some things that we can make out of honey? So obviously we can eat honey straight. We can eat the honeycomb. I know that they make like honeycomb candies out of it. What are some other things that people make out of honey?
Well, first of all,
if you know.
Well, first of all, confession, I actually don't like honey that much. So like, no joke, I like haven't made that many things with honey. One thing that comes to mind is mead. It's the oldest, like, I think it's the oldest alcoholic drink they found was mead. I'm not sure. And I know I'm talking to kids, so you guys don't really care about mead, but that's one thing. And then what else do people make out of honey? I mean, it's a great alternative to sugar. So, and I think honey is usually, for like the equivalency, I think honey's sweeter than sugar, so you use a little less honey. And you can look up that conversion. I can't remember what it is, but you can always use honey, yeah, as like an alternative sweetener.
Sorry, go ahead.
Huh?
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, and I laugh because I'm like, it's still sugar, right? So I'm not sure if it's like better for people that shouldn't have sugar, but It's yummy. Um,
My mom always told me that honey has some antibacterial properties, and that's one of the reasons that they suggest you put it in. So you like when you have a sore throat and you drink hot water with honey and lemon and ginger in it, because it helps make your sore throat feel better. It's not medicine, but it is what people used to use before we had medicine.
right. And it also loosens phlegm.
Nice. I need some right now.
So if you have a cough, yeah. So I've given like a spoonful to my kids, and I really have noticed the difference. And then also in medicine, they put, and I think this goes back hundreds of years, but they'll like put honey on wounds to prevent infection or to even heal infections. So I think UNM even did a study on a specific type of honey for wound care. And that was recent. It's really interesting. So
that's really cool. But
yeah.
we're not telling you guys, please don't go out if you get a cut and then come inside and put honey on it. Please wash it with soap and water and keep it clean.
Yes, thank you.
Obviously.
Want to be liable. Like, well, I put honey on it.
Right. Go to the doctor and they're like, well, what did you do? Like, well, the Girl Scouts told me to put honey on. And we're like, no, we didn't.
No.
To do that. Well, we've gone for about 30 minutes. Is there anything else that you want to share about beekeeping, or maybe how people, if they are interested in becoming a beekeeper or volunteering with you or with other beekeepers, is there a way that they can get involved?
Yeah, so I think I said earlier, check out abqbeaks.org. That's our local.
In the chat, so it's in the comments if you guys want to just follow that link.
Cool. And then I also mentioned the state certification program, which didn't happen this year because of the COVID stuff. But it's an awesome 2-year program that I did. That's what really got me going. And it should, if things, continue to go in the right direction, we should have it next year. But you can go to nmbeekeepers.org, which is the state group's website that does that program. And what else? And then you can obviously contact me at deserthives.com. You can find my email and phone number. But I would really recommend, mostly if you're in Albuquerque, to get involved with our local group, because that's where you're going to find all the other resources and people to talk to and people you can ask questions to. And we're actually having a meeting tonight from 6:30 to 8 online. So if you go to abqbeaks.org and you want to just watch a meeting, which happens to be for new beekeepers tonight.
How convenient.
I just realized that. How convenient. Perfect. So I would really recommend checking that out. It's a great group, and I think they're kind of moving in a direction to also include like new beekeepers and answer questions that people might be afraid to ask. So yeah.
Cool. And then how old do you have to be a beekeeper?
Oh my gosh. Did you see Teddy? Like, how could you not, right? So Teddy, it has helped me beekeep. So he's 5 now, but he was in the hive with me at like 4 years old. And I have like this adorable beekeeping suit. So you can start beekeeping at like any age. I mean, if you can stand up and walk and wear a bee suit, I think finding a small bee suit might be your biggest challenge. But yeah, there's so much diversity within beekeeping and beekeepers, like of all ages, all groups. So it's just great.
Cool. And then my last question before we kind of go off the live, is kind of a fun one. But what are some plants that are native to New Mexico, specifically since we're in New Mexico, that we can plant either in pots or in our yards to help attract bees and get them food?
Awesome. I love that question because it helps bees, and that's the best way we can help bees, is planting pollinator-friendly plants that are native. And so some of the best ones that we like as beekeepers are Russian sage. These might not all be native, because you have to remember honeybees are not native to North America, but native plants are better because they use less water, right? So anyways, Russian sage, lavender is a good one. Blue mist spirea. What else do they love? Catmint is an excellent plant for bees because it blooms twice. You can deadhead it and even have it bloom longer. What else? Have you seen the golden rain trees around town right now? Those are amazing. You'll have to look up golden rain tree and then you'll start seeing them everywhere. It's like a joke with me and my kids. I'm like, there's a golden rain tree, and they'll just be.
We don't have a golden rain tree. We have a desert bird of paradise in our yard. But it's, I was about to say, I think they look similar.
Yeah. Well, no, the golden rain tree has like drooping yellow clusters of flowers.
Yes, I do know what those are.
Yeah, and they're in bloom right now, and it sounds like the whole tree's buzzing because like you have so many bees on it. So those are awesome. And I was going to say trees are just good for bees because it's a lot of nectar and pollen in one area. So they don't have to fly around as much to get an abundant supply. So like fruit trees, the golden rain tree is excellent. And those plants I mentioned earlier.
I just want to make sure I was typing these into the chat so that we have them on the thing. So you said catmint, right?
Catmint.
I got that one. I got the other one.
Awesome.
Okay, and then we do have one more question. She says that there's time for one more question. Girl Scout Amari would like to know, what does the queen bee do and what is her job in the hive?
Love it. So important, right? So the queen bee, which I think she must have seen the picture. I like totally misplaced it already. But, oh, here she is. So the queen bee's job is to lay eggs. And can you see those eggs in the cells? She can lay up to 3,000 eggs a day. And that's what keeps the hive going. That's what creates all the worker bees and the drones, which are the male bees. And so the queen, it's funny, we think of the queen like ruling over the hive, right? And just being like above her queendom. But in reality, the worker bees kind of move her around where they want her to go, and she just lays eggs. That's her job. That's her one and only job. And there's typically only one queen per hive. Sometimes you get a mother-daughter queen set that will cohabitate that hive, but usually there's one queen. And what else could I tell you? But yeah, the worker bees do everything else for her. They clean her, they feed her. So yeah.
Pamper her. Sounds pretty nice.
Pamper her, yeah.
All right.
We're laying all those eggs.
All right. Since there is a little bit of a delay between the Facebook and us, I'm just going to give it a second to see if we do have anybody else type in. But this is going to be the end of today's live with Amy. So I just wanted to thank you, Amy, for being here with us, even though, and being flexible because the high winds couldn't go out and go do the hive inspection. I learned a lot. It's really exciting. I love learning about bees and our pollinators and how we can help them, also how we can educate other people to help them as well. And then just kind of a recap for everybody. Today we talked about what beekeeping is, what Amy does for her business and as a beekeeper, some of the tools that she uses as a beekeeper. We answered your question. We talked about how we can help bees a little bit and where we can get some more information. And then just to reiterate, my name is Charlie and I'm the camp director for the Girl Scouts of New Mexico Trails. And I also do the outdoor program pillar. I'm the manager for that. And then Amy runs Desert Hives, right?
Yes.
Her business. And she keeps bees, but she also helps other people keep bees. And she works for one of the open spaces here in Albuquerque. Make sure Oh, and Valeria is on and she says, hi, Amy.
Hi, Valeria. You're awesome. And I don't work for the open space. Okay. The hives just happen to be on open space property. It's for the New Mexico Beekeepers Association.
And that's the nnbeekeepers.org one, right?
Yes, that's it.
And then I did drop into the comments that website, the ABQ Beaks, which I love because it's ABQ Beekeeper Geeks. And then your site as well for Desert Hives. And then we will be together here live again. We said next week, right?
I think so.
Yeah, so
works for me.
Yeah, hopefully next week, same time at 11:30, for a live hive inspection of the bees at Amy's house.
Yes.
Okay.
Exciting. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you, Charlie.
Everyone. Don't get off the Zoom yet. I'm just going to stop the live.
Okay.